Hi, my name is Jim Fox. I'm the current chairman of the Planning Board. With me today is Pat Kerfoot and Bob Leary. Together we make up the Local Comprehensive Plan Subcommittee of the Planning Board. We're here today to try to bring attention to something we've been working on for years, and it's the accessory apartment bylaw. It's a component of the overall housing program that we have for the town. Part of our goals we've set up is in Falmouth, as part of our local comprehensive plan, is housing for everybody. And so part of this, what we've done is we've gone out and we had a study done. What was this, Pat, the study was done?
It was the Housing Demand Study and Needs Analysis. It was done by RKG Associates, and Judy Barrett was the one who interviewed people here in town and was responsible for putting it together. And it should be said that she won an award for it, so it is definitely an excellent study.
And from that, we pulled a lot of things for the local comprehensive plan housing element, which in turn has given us items to work on for planning issues, for bylaw changes and things like that. So there's been one step after the other that's kind of come to this.
Town meeting passed that, the comprehensive, that component more than a year ago. Is that correct?
It was Springtown meeting,
Springtown
2015.
Meeting. And in part of that plan, what it called for, as I recall, the response to that study was that Falmouth has had some pretty drastic changes in its population. That's really what got us going on it, that the population has actually shrunk by, I think it said as much as 3% in the last 10 years. I've even seen higher numbers than that recently. And the other change is the aging of our population, that the average age has moved closer to 55 or 60 years old as composed to 35 or 40. And so it was determined that what we need to do is create more housing opportunities for younger people, for the town as a whole, but especially some of the younger people. So in response to that, we've come up with a draft of an accessory apartment bylaw. And we also have a housing program where we're going to be looking at possibly multifamily housing areas in some way, and revisiting the conversion bylaw, which allows converting a larger structure into a 2 or 3 or 4 family home. And those are all identified in that housing study as what she called low-hanging fruit that could be accomplished with just a few bylaw changes and some understanding, and that's our attempt. So we've got the accessory apartment bylaw drafted and posted on our website. You can go to the planning board website. It's the second from the bottom. It's a copy, you can get it. And we'd like to encourage all groups in town to become familiar with it and come to our meetings. And so by the time we bring this forward, it'll be well vetted and everyone will have a chance to give some input. You want to start off?
Well, one of the reasons we wanted to revisit this bylaw was the conversion bylaw wasn't working. Right. And the whole point of that was to create housing, and it wasn't doing it. So we wanted to revisit that, create a bylaw that would help people create housing, whether it's for them to age in place or whether it's to rent out for additional income. But we need to do something so that there are some smaller units, especially for the younger people, the young working people in town, that they'd be able to rent someplace. Because I remember when I first came to town, people felt that they had to buy a house. They had to move to Falmouth and buy a house because there just wasn't something available for them that was reasonable. And I was a young person, single person, and I went through all the renting houses and apartments and things like that, and you had a multitude of roommates, and you did the winter-summer routine. And we need more year-round housing so that people aren't constantly uprooted all the time, and make it affordable.
Well, I think that the previous bylaw had a lot of restrictions on it, and that's one of the reasons why we think it failed. Because I believe you had to put a deed in your house for perpetuity, that it had to be an affordable component only.
Yeah. And
so what we try to do is craft one that has some controls on it, so it doesn't get a control, but not so restrictive. So we try to do it with size, with owner occupancy, and we try to, the overall component is to blend into the neighborhood. I mean, that's our old theory. It's supposed to look like a single family home. That is really the biggest concern we had, is many people were worried, oh, what are you going to do? Turn everything into two duplexes everywhere. And these are not duplexes we're talking about. The unit can only be 800 square feet, and it can only be 30% of the primary structure. And it has to be attached, and it has to, in design compatibility, look like part of a single-family home and not change the character of the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, when you were talking about the size, Jim, it can have no more, an accessory can have no more than 2 bedrooms.
Yep.
And a maximum of 800 square feet.
Right.
Or it's 50% of the floor area of the principal dwelling, whichever is less.
Okay.
The other thing that we were very careful about saying, though, also is we did not want these to be somebody buys it, puts an accessory apartment on, and now all of a sudden both are rented.
Right.
We didn't want it for income, we wanted it for housing. And what is frequently happening now when you mentioned the aging population is somebody gets older, a spouse maybe dies, they don't have need for that big house, but they want to stay on their property. And it would be kind of nice to have somebody living there too.
So in that sense, it is income, though, but not for the whole house.
But not the major reason for it.
Right.
It's to have housing, but it's also so that there's a diversity of housing type where an older person has a smaller place, could stay on their own property, age in place, if you will.
And most of the first part of the discussion was the existing building itself, and we talked about what about accessory buildings, and do we allow that to happen? And we went back and forth over converting garages, and could you only convert the second floor of a garage, or could you convert the whole garage? And should it be by right or special permit? And so we've been tossing those around, whether it should be special permit. And I think we agreed at our last meeting that we're considering special permit for detached buildings.
Right. So if you have a building that's perfect,
Right.
Looks like a garage but has a second floor on it, has the right size, but it's not attached, that you wouldn't be prohibited from doing it, but
Right.
that's where you would have to have
Right.
a special permit, and technically that's where, our neighborhood views and vistas, 242-16 character of the neighborhood views and vistas. So the planning board would actually do a site plan review to ensure that it doesn't look like a duplex, that it just blends in as a single family home.
And if you'll remember too, that one of the big discussions is, well, okay, somebody's building a house, new house, new garage. Are we going to allow an accessory apartment to be built purposely with that new construction? And we did decide, that would probably be a pretty good idea to allow that at the time.
Well, one of the things we wanted to avoid was having to put a date on this bylaw. The current bylaws now has a specific date when houses that were built after a particular date could take advantage of this. And if you built your house, got your U&O a day after, you didn't fit into that really wasn't fair. So we want to make this fair.
I think the conversion bylaw that we have in the books now for converting is 1980.
It is.
So it was done in response to try to protect some of the older housing stock. Some of the big old houses were getting torn down, and the ones I'm familiar with is one down on Thomas Lane. There's one on Clinton Street. A couple of big homes that no one wanted to take care of anymore, but by breaking them up into 4 units, that could do it. But I believe that bylaw, and it still should. You really can't add on to them. We're still conversion means staying within the same structure.
Right.
But those can all be equal size units. That's a little bit different than the accessory, where we're going to say you can build it now, any year, but it's got to be 50% of the structure and no more than 800 feet, whichever is less.
And we also have to come up with some concrete definitions about what detached means, so that you just can't have a breezeway attached to your garage and call that an attached dwelling. Things like that we need to hammer out as well.
And we've spent some time, one of the concerns, reaching out to other committees. Obviously, the protection of our coastal ponds is really important, and everyone knows adding bedrooms is an issue. So either right now, if you're either going to be on the sewer or in an area where it doesn't affect the coastal pond, and if you are, we're talking probably denitrification system being added to it, which will add some expense, but we have to balance.
Or it's strictly limited, the bedroom to 1 per 10,000 square foot lot.
Right.
Yeah.
But that'll make it very difficult to build.
Sure.
I mean, that doesn't go, our comprehensive plan talks about where we want growth, and we want it near the main streets, you know, near the centers of town. That's where we want these things. We don't want to be building them way out in the far ends of town, because we'd have to build transportation and sewer systems for them. It's more village-centric we've been talking about. So, I mean, that's part of the hope we can do that. And so to accomplish that, problem is our villages are also right near our bodies of water. So we still have, so it's either the sewer or denitrification systems for now.
Well, and you'll probably remember, Jim, one of our original conversations about this when we were talking in our small committee, not the whole planning board, in devising this, is do we want the density that it would increase density to a certain extent, not hugely, but do we want that density to be in, say, the center of town, where there's transportation, where there's public water or sewer? So that conversation took place too. So that's why the discussion points as to whether it should be allowed in 85% of the town, that could happen in the residential areas, or whether we want to constrain it more to smaller areas, the villages, let's say. So that discussion is still somewhat open, that we're hoping to get some input on.
So in our process going forward, we've been working this for months, but we'll be bringing it up soon on a joint meeting with the selectmen. That will be going through them, and then it'll be come back. We'll probably have two more meetings at the planning board level discussing it. And then when once it gets drafted, then we go back again. There's 2 more big hearings. We have a meeting, the planning board does on the whole thing, a public meeting just on the bylaw after it's drafted. And the selectmen have one just on the bylaw. And then the big meeting of all is town meetings when we bring it to the whole group. So there's time.
And the draft has been disseminated to other committees and other groups in town as well, so that hopefully we will get some feedback from those groups.
That's something we've been doing a little differently. You probably remember, both of you, that when a bylaw was put together, it got put on the warrant, and then all of a sudden we got feedback. We've been making it a point to do these public meetings to get feedback on what we're doing before it ever goes to the warrant.
Yeah.
Anybody that's interested, planning board page on the town website, second from the bottom, accessory bylaw, it's right there. Download it and send us your comments. We're always accepting written comments on it at any time. So if you have an interest, people could dive in.
But keep your eye on the agenda for when it is going to be a discussion, because one of the things we've been doing that Jim has been putting on the agenda is that discussion component of our meeting, so that we can discuss it amongst ourselves as a board, and people can hear what we're thinking. I think it's a good way to get out to the public our thoughts on something, so that they tune in and go, gee, that's something I'd like to make a comment on, and show up to one of the meetings, and we welcome those comments.
So what do you think are some of our biggest hurdles on it in town? Where do you think we're going to get the most pushback, and how can we help solve some of those problems?
Well, where we decide to implement this, whether we pick a district or whether we allow it to go town-wide like the current conversion bylaw, those are things that I think might concern people. And I think we have to allay some of those concerns, and I think we'll do that through some of the meetings that we have when people hear us out.
I think we also, our biggest challenge is that I think it has to be by right of some kind, with a design review. Yeah. With a design review. And because it's the special permit requirements, I think it just won't happen. Yeah. I think that's part of the problem why it hasn't happened, and it's very, very difficult. Special permit process is difficult. So, but if we can get the right design criteria out there, have everybody understand that it has to fit in the neighborhood, that we get to do a design review with them and polish it up,
Yeah.
it should go.
Yeah, we want to try and make it less onerous,
Right.
and that's why this has happened with the conversion bylaw. It was just so onerous and had so many restrictions that no one wanted to do it, and I wouldn't blame anybody. So I think this committee has said on a number of issues that we've written elements for that we want to try and get away from a lot of the regulation. We want to make things a little bit easier, and the latest element we've been working on, the historical element, is part of that as well. We've been looking at how we can make that less restrictive.
Well, the RKG report also pointed out that Falmouth is a very difficult place for builders to work in.
Right.
Which is why we want to focus on making it a little bit simpler for people to understand what they can do so that it's not seemingly at a whim.
Right, and it isn't this huge roadmap to get from one end to the other, that it's going to be fairly straightforward and simple and black and white. This is what you can do, this is what you need to have done, and these are the permits, or these are the boards, and have at it.
But Jim, you also asked, where do you think some of the major pushback is going to be? And I think one of them could be the size of the lot, the minimum lot size that this is allowed on, because we do have a fairly significant number of small lots. And we heard that from some board members too, that this might be a problem in neighborhoods with very small lots.
Well, I think we're not changing the lot coverage, okay? The 20% lot coverage is there, so that
Right.
same protection is there, okay? And we're saying you have to build it like it looks like it's part of the main house too. So I think, and we're covering, I think with the septic systems, I think we've really approached it, and no more than 2 bedrooms added to it. So, I think there's other protections for those points. Everyone's going to make those arguments, but they're already there. You could already go to 20% lot coverage on your house as big as you can and have your 4 bedrooms now.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up, so that this could be brought out.
You can always do it.
Yeah, we had discussed it.
This is what the real difference is you can always have extra bedrooms in your house and whatnot as long as you have the right size septic system. The real difference is this is going to let you have a stove. And that really is what creates another housing unit. The building department comes in and they see a kitchen with a stove, that's another living unit. And without a stove, it's not considered a habitable unit, it's just extra rooms.
Yeah. Well, and density is kind of a funny thing too, when you look at it from the perspective of my wife's house. There were 7 of us living there. Now there's only 2. If we converted the second floor to an apartment, it would handle a couple. It would maybe 2 people.
Yeah.
So there'd still be less people living in that house than there had been in the past. And I could see a lot of empty nesters in that same situation where they might have had 3 or 4 kids or 2 kids, and there's 4 or 5 people living in the house. There's only 1 or 2 now. So there'd be actually less people in some of these houses than there had been in the past. So density is kind of a funny thing. I just thought I'd mention that.
But we also should point out that in no case there is sort of a limit here, because you cannot have more than 4 bedrooms on a lot under 20,000 square feet.
Right.
We're not changing that either.
No. So,
So-
this is why I brought up this
So
whole
some of the
question
protections
here
are all in place, so people can use that as an argument, but you can already have a single family home that size.
Right.
So it's really just the fact that we're letting you put a stove in and making another unit in it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and giving some privacy to that unit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that it's rentable, and those are the components. But it has to be done in a way so from the outwards appearance of the street that it still looks like a single family home. And that's going to be the challenge for these folks. They're going to have to design them carefully, and they're going to have to come to the planning board with a site plan review process, and we're going to have to determine that it does.
And I
look
think
like a
the part where we have talked about the potential of the summer rental thing, we hashed that out, and that was one of the first things that came out when we presented it to our board. Somebody
Right.
said, well, what about people just renting it out for the summer? So we had the residency requirement for the owner.
And 6 months.
And 6 months.
6 months on the rental.
And you can't rent it out by the week or the month. So there are those protections. So I think that should put some people's minds at ease.
But we had to make it loose enough so it does happen. I think
Right.
the last go-around, we already have this bylaw. It's been on the books for years, but it doesn't get used. And I think the biggest change is these are not going to be income restricted. And I think that people are not going to have to deed away the rights to have income restricted benefit on their, for the rest of their life. It's not a forever thing. So,
Let's bring out the word, Jim, that we've been talking around, and that's affordable.
right,
Because purposely, we had discussed whether we wanted to call this affordable or not, and
Right.
we said no, because this is more than affordable housing. We are assuming by the smaller size, it may be a wrong assumption,
no, I think it's great though.
but that it will be affordable. And in the purpose, we say broaden the range of housing for all.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and let the market play its role in creating.
Well, I think
the-
if you
the
take away
affordability.
restrictions, the market can come into play, and the controls we put on it is size.
Yeah, I mean,
So
a one-bedroom apartment isn't going to command.
Or an 800 square foot apartment is not going to
Right.
become a high income.
Right.
I mean, it might someday, but I don't want to project it. That would really be something. But right now, you know, I think that the 800 square feet is, you know, and 2 bedrooms is a good restriction. It makes it for working people's housing. You know, people have real jobs, need places to live, and they're probably going to be related. We used to call this the in-law. I mean, and I think these people, in all likelihood, at some time or other, would be relatives. But if those relatives move away, you don't have to tear it down. You can rent it to somebody else.
Yeah.
And so I think that'll make it a lot easier. So we had to find a way to loosen up some of the bottlenecks that we had put in for it, and I think that stopped it. And that's what I've been trying to do, is look at why it didn't happen and try to find ways of solving problems for that.
The other thing I'd like to bring out too is that, okay, you pass the initial inspection and everything is fine. And then guess what? It becomes a summer rental or something else, flies in the face of the bylaw. It is no longer legal. And we discussed this too. How is that controlled? Well, you have to give a yearly report to the building commissioner, and then upon a written determination by the building commissioner that the owner has failed to comply with these provisions, the property shall be restored
Right.
to single-family dwelling status.
And
So you
that would
can't
be
make these into income properties and just rent them
Right.
out to all different tenants. They have to be owner occupied, and the owner has to sign an affidavit every year
right.
saying, yeah, this is what I've done, and it has to maintain it, or they could lose that standing. And that's a pretty big loss if you've gone to all the trouble to build that, and you don't provide your affidavits and you don't keep up, then it could go away.
Well, you could say, well, now we've just done something awful. We've made it far more restrictive and more difficult by doing that. But we want to keep those housing options open.
Right,
Yeah, I mean, we want to protect the neighborhoods as well.
yes.
So, and this would be complaint driven. And I'm sure if you're living next door to someplace and you see people coming in and out all the time, I'm sure the building commissioner's phone would be ringing.
And the owner's not there, and the affidavits aren't flying, bang, that's gone.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that's ever happened yet, or I don't think we ever challenged any of the ones, but we don't have enough of them in town to
No,
really
we
make a
don't.
difference right now.
Right.
Well, we didn't have that component in what's
Right.
there right now either, and that was one of our concerns. We also looked at how other communities are handling
Right.
this, and that stood out as a way of
Yeah,
keeping it
what
you
towns
want it to
were
be.
where it worked and where
Right.
it didn't. That was interesting to
I thought
see
so.
that. Yep.
Well, I think we've pretty much covered it all. We want to encourage everybody to pay attention to our agendas coming up. Download the bylaw and read it. Take an opportunity to come to the planning board meetings when we're still taking public input. We'll take written input at any time. And then the process will be probably sometime after this town meeting's over, we'll probably draft ours and have a discussion at our level. Then we take it to the selectmen for a discussion from them. And then we bring it on to the town meeting for the big discussion with all 250 town meeting
I
members.
think the way we're approaching this bylaw is the right way to do it, because people have a chance to have some input in the beginning before it happens, and it's a more proactive approach to writing a bylaw, in my view. I
Well,
believe.
we're also not pushing it with a timeline.
Right.
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 We hope we're going to have it for fall town meeting.
Yeah.
But if it's not ready,
Yeah. And this is an important bylaw.
It is.
I mean, it really is, because housing is an issue in this town. And this is, I figure, a low-impact way of creating some more housing. It's, I think, an easier way or a better way of doing it as opposed to large 40B projects. So I think this should get some support from the town. At least I hope it does, because I think this is going to be a good bylaw for the town.
I know what I plan to do with it. The FCTV does a really good job putting these things together, and then we can, they get compacted and made presentable. They can convert it to a YouTube and attach it to an email and send it to every single town meeting member before the meeting. And that's what my plans are to do with it. That I have developed a little bit of skills in that area. That it's like tweeting it. You can grab. They post on the website. You can grab it and attach it to it, and then just send that tweet to every single town meeting member. And then they're going to not only get this, they'll get our presentation as well. So that's the long range plan. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to come here and do this on this group, because it enables. I could never produce anything like this on our own. So it enables us to get it out and not only show it on television, but then to send it out to them to town meeting in a timely fashion. So hopefully just before we go to town meeting, they'll all get this presentation sent to them directly.
Yeah.
I think it's important that town meeting members get the breadth of discussion that they frequently do not get on bylaws.
And you know, and the other thing too is that town meetings, people love to make amendments. We'd like to hear from those people now.
Yes.
You know, that we don't want to create sausage on town meeting floor. You know, if there's some really serious issues, given an opportunity you have a problem with it, bring them forward to discussion and let's get started on working it. Housing for everyone, for our whole town is the goal here. And it's going to take a lot of hard work for us to do it. But that's it.